Hello, my name is Eric Hibbard, and I'd like to talk to you a bit about security and privacy concerns associated with artificial intelligence. There are lots of issues and concerns around AI, lots of excitement. But what I'd like to do here is highlight some of what the security and privacy communities are considering when looking at artificial intelligence. So with that, I can get started. So as a bit of introduction, we see just lots of opportunities and challenges for different facets of society with regard to artificial intelligence. For security purposes, we see it as being a power tool and for both adversaries and defenders. And in some cases, we're seeing the adversaries sort of jumping out in the lead, actually using AI very early on for nefarious purposes. And in case of privacy, there are a lot of concerns that AI is going to um, cause issues with depending on what jurisdiction you're in, that are privacy oriented. So this is an area where we're seeing laws and regulations already being developed and in some cases enacted. Okay, so it almost goes without saying that there's this AI ethical and society concerns, and these really do need to be factored into any sort of development when an organization is working on AI systems and applications. You need to sort of take into context, the scope and risks that that have to be considered, and make sure that those undesirable ethical and societal outcomes are mitigated to the degree that's possible, and in some cases required. So those things are things like financial harm, psychological harm, harm to physical health or safety. Safety is definitely one of the big concerns. Intangible property. This is an area right now where there's with some of the generative AI, lots of buzz about this right now, where uh, copyrighted material is being uh, reused in ways that the owners didn't necessarily authorize or even intend. And then there's social or political, systems that can be affected. Election interference is something in the U.S. that, is for, at this point, a lot of concern that just looking forward to, the elections later in the year. Um, and then, civil liberties, that you could end up with, AI being used in ways that people could end up being imprisoned. It could be easier to identify certain individuals. So a lot of this material is out of an ISO document that you see here at the bottom. This is the ISO technical report 24368. It's an overview of ethical and societal concerns. So if you're interested in this kind of material, you may find that reference is something you want to take a look at. So when we talk about harms, sort of taking it a little further, there's this harm to people, harm to the organization, harm to ecosystems. And, this is out of the NIST Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework. So it's identifying, from an individual basis, harm to their civil liberties, their rights, physical or psychological safety or economic opportunity, the community. It's, harm to groups such as a discrimination against a population or a subgroup, and, harm to democratic participation or educational access. And then likewise, you've got, similar issues with organizations and then harm to, the ecosystem itself. So, so when NIST is actually looking at AI, these are some of the things that they're worried about. How do you guard against these, prevent these kinds of problems, emerging from artificial intelligence? Um, There's also some work in the OECD, which has done a lot of work in the privacy space as well, and in terms of looking at artificial intelligence. Um, and they have a framework for classifying a classification of AI systems. That framework spans things like the AI model, the economic context, and then data and input and tasks and output, and then how that relates to people on the planet. Um, this was done fairly early on, from an AI perspective, just a few years ago. In 2022, seems like a lifetime ago when it comes to AI. Um, but they're looking at things like value-based principles for all AI actors and recommendations to policymakers for AI policies. And you see that they've got a set of principles that are dealing with people and planet, human rights, privacy, fairness, transparency, and explainability, robustness, security, safety, and accountability. And then on the flip side, there's a worry that if you go too far with regulations and whatnot, that you may stifle innovation. So they're worried about the appropriate investments in R&D and data, compute technologies, basically how to deal with policies and regulating environments, jobs. And there's a lot of concerns about loss of jobs, but potentially creation of jobs, automation and skills, and then international cooperation. So this work was fairly early on, but it is actually underpinning a lot of follow-on work that we're seeing in the international community. So again, the source for this is down below, and these materials are readily available if you're interested in those. So the NIST AI risk management framework has a life cycle, and it's basically builds on the OECD model, which if you look in sort of the center, those are the OECD items. But what they've sort of wrapped around that are things like test, evaluation, verification, and validation processes. And these need to be done throughout, an AI's life cycle and generalize, the operational context of an AI system. So, NIST is again trying to um, deal with, the broader set of risks that an AI system may present to organizations and those who touch it. All right, so NIST isn't the only player that's operating in the lifecycle arena, and so ISO IEC has an AI lifecycle and what we call high-level processes. This document was published in 2022. It's the document number is 22989. And it's basically the AI concepts and terminology. So they're looking at inception, design and development, verification, validation, deployment, operations, and monitoring, reevaluate, and retirement. Nothing earth-shattering here, but it is important to note that ISO is calling out that things like security and privacy, risk management, and governance are things that span this entire life cycle. And depending on where you are in this life cycle, these things can change significantly. Many developers of AI aren't necessarily looking at all these elements, even though they may be tracking this kind of life cycle, or they may be partway through the life cycle. Because in many cases, it's early days for what we're seeing with artificial intelligence being made available to sort of the world, if you will. All right. So, is AI different than traditional software? The general conclusion is it has many of the same problems or issues or challenges, depending on how you want to look at it. And then there are some more. And so just to sort of highlight these, AI, especially generative AI, is very dependent on the data that is used essentially to train um, the the AI application or implementation. And if it's not representative of what you really need to have, then the net result of the AI system is going to have some form of bias, some set of issues. So this input data or training data is absolutely critical. Um, and this is an area where there's concern about how do you protect that data that's used as the basis for training. Do you have legitimate access, or rights to that data? Simply pointing, an AI implementation at the internet is definitely not appropriate. And we've seen early instances where something like that may have actually been done. Um, there are possibilities where uh, during the training, there could be intentional or unintentional changes made that would have a significant impact on the AI system's performance. In other words, how its outputs, for example. Um, Another area of concern is the data sets that are used to train the AI systems. Um, you may have created a data set to train an HR-based AI implementation, for example, and then that was what that data was originally set up for. However, it might get consumed elsewhere for some sort of marketing kind of thing. Um, that could be a problem. It's not its original intention. And of course, another example, and we've seen this with some of the early Gen AI implementations, is that some of the data that was used to train is stale or outdated. And, so how you go about maintaining freshness, if you will, can be a challenge because the training part is something that is fairly complex for many of these systems. And last but not least is, AI systems, the scale and complexity that they deal with are many systems contain billions or even trillions of decision points. And this is something that, a lot of common software today just don't deal with that scale or complexity. So continuing on, there's a higher degree of difficulty in predicting failure modes. So how do you know that the AI is, doing what it's supposed to be doing? So you've got just the scale of issues. How do you know that you've got a sort of a handle on on what that system's doing? Privacy risk. It's possible that through data aggregation, what you thought was anonymized data may no longer be anonymized. You might be able to de-anonymize it. Um, there's increased opacity and concerns about reproducibility. Can you re if you started from scratch, get to the same point, in the from a training perspective, and that can be difficult in that you may start with a training set, but then due to some interactions, your AI implementation may end up in a sort of a different state, if you will. Um, we've got lots of problems or difficulties in doing AI-based software testing, knowing what to test, how to test it. There's not the same kind of controls for code development. So you're not running some sort of checker on the software looking for certain kinds of flaws, like uh, inappropriate accesses and things like that. AI systems, they could have those, but those are not likely to be the the bigger concern from a testing perspective. There are lots of concerns around computational costs for AI systems. There are some countries that are already having serious thoughts about whether they want some of these large data centers to be housed in their jurisdictions, uh, partly because they may not have the appropriate power, electrical power, and or water necessary to cool these systems. And of course, the last but in this chart is inability to predict or detect side effects on AI-based systems beyond statistical measures. So these are when we look at AI software, things that most software would not, these would not come to play. But these are things that have to be considered when you're developing, AI software. Um, there are also attacks that are specific to AI systems. And some of these, that you may see in, like, for example, databases and whatnot. But in general, these are somewhat unique. The source of this is a new ISO standard that's under development. It's 27090. So this is guidance for addressing security threats and failures. This document is likely to be published in about 18 months or so. So what are the kinds of attacks that we might see here? Well, there are things like poisoning attacks. So this is you're intentionally injecting malicious data into the training or inference data of an AI system, and you're trying to basically corrupt it, teaching it something it's not supposed to know, trying to influence its behavior in a particular way. Evasion attacks, so inputs are entered into, the AI system that appear correct to humans, but are wrongly classified by the AI system. Membership inference, this is where, the attacker is able to attribute training data membership, such as PII, and then recover this information through crafted input-output pairing. So imagine a law firm. I like to talk about law firms. They're fun. A law firm that is actually using generative AI to draft material for a particular court case, for example. And imagine that the opposing counsel, using the same AI system, was able to figure out, well, what were they working on? That might be a problem, right? So you could see where this kind of thing could happen, where if you've got multiple competitors or users that might be sort of opposing, where leaking this kind of information could be problematic. So and there might in fact be incentives for and to recover that kind of information. So model exfiltration. So imagine that the value of the training data is quite high, and how losing that to someone else could be a competitive disadvantage to your organization if you're so you've got the AI software, but really it's the data that you're using for the training and how you get to the point where it's actually usable that's important. Somebody's able to basically take that, then it's a significant loss. Model inversion, you're producing an output that mimics an input used in the original training set. So this is back to some of my lawyer example. And then scaling attacks where your scaling limitations are known, or you're able to derive that, and you essentially try to overwhelm the AI system with requests. In other settings, we might consider this like a denial of service attack for web servers or something like that. Right. In the privacy side, again, looking at this from through the lens of AI, things like linkability, identifiability, non-repudiation, detectability, disclosure of information, unawareness. For example, this one's interesting. The PI principles, being unaware of what PI about them is being processed, and then non-compliance. So, as I said earlier, privacy is an area where we're seeing sort of the regulatory bodies and legislatures are probably most active right now from an artificial intelligence perspective. This document that's referenced below is 27091. It is very early stages, so these are some early concepts that are being kicked around. And I would say that this document is probably a couple of years off from publication. But as you can see, the security and the privacy are being treated somewhat differently in the security, in the ISO world, where they're looking at both security and privacy, because they do have different implications and issues. So our friends at NIST have, this risk trustworthiness issue as well. And so in their risk management framework, they've identified some components that are, from a trustworthiness that have to be dealt with. And these are things like, is it safe? Is it secure and resilient? Is it explainable and interpretable? Is it privacy enhanced? Is it fair with, harmful bias managed? And, underlying that, is it valid and reliable? And, there's accountability and transparency, in place. And it's quite a bit of descriptive material that addresses these, and you can actually have some of these components, but not all of them, which can, result in problems. This, the NIST AI risk management framework is definitely one of the key documents when considering, especially, security and privacy issues. All right, so a few noteworthy AI trends and developments. Clearly, governments have taken note of artificial intelligence. There's earlier this year, the EU came out with its Artificial Intelligence Act. There's an executive order in the US. This is out of the Office of the President, on safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. There are at least four US states that are working on regulations. So California, Connecticut, Louisiana, and Vermont. I would expect that will continue to grow. Privacy and safety are major areas of concern. Intellectual property issues are definitely coming to the forefront. The legal community is very much aware of this. Keep in mind that in the US, it's human-generated content can be protected. If it's generated by artificial intelligence, probably not so much. And you should probably be consulting your legal team about protecting, AI-generated code and images and things like that and other. And then last, I would, if you're sort of what's the next thing to maybe take a look at is what I'm seeing as agentic artificial intelligence systems are beginning to emerge. Think of this as agents that are working autonomous or semi-autonomous. And I think it's going to expand the fun that we're likely to see in the security and privacy space. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and please take a moment to rate the session. Your feedback is important to us, and we take that feedback, and it has a direct impact on kinds of sessions we offer in the future. So I wish you well and many adventures with artificial intelligence.